Whoa there, Space Cowboy. Brokeback Bebop is a podcast with explicit content intended only for mature bounty hunters. Listener discretion is advised. Listen to all 40 steamy sessions of the show right now by supporting Brokeback Bebop at patreon.com/can'tdisappointpodcast.
I think it's time to blow this scene. Get everybody in the stuff together. Okay.
3, 2, 1. Let's jam.
That's what I got for this week.
It's nice when you let the white part of yourself out a little bit to enjoy a day in the sun.
Let it get some time. Well, you know, white skin does hide 7 blemishes, Zach.
No, it doesn't.
What the fuck does that mean?
Steven, you're an older boy, an older man from the last time we talked on this program.
I am. I have leveled up, as nerds like to say on their posts about their birthday.
How are you feeling? Do you feel older? Are you 25 now, too?
I'm 25 now, yeah.
That's a weird age,
25.
isn't it? That's a quarter of a century. That's a milestone. That's a round, like not an even number, but it's a good round number, you know.
Yeah, you know, I'm over that hill, Zach.
Yeah.
I'm about halfway through my time here,
Yep.
and I'm just, you know, happy to
That's a little generous.
have made it. Yeah,
Well, I'm
isn't it?
glad you're here. What did you do for your birthday? Anything fun?
Yeah, some friends came up and stayed the weekend. Went and got some, like, drinks and stuff with a bunch of people from, like, work on Sunday. Watched a lot of anime. It was good. It's a good time.
All right, well, we're here. My back is broke. Are you ready to hop on in? Get
Oh,
bebopped?
I'm gonna beeb your
Bebooped?
broke back.
Well, what can we start off by? I don't know. What are we gonna do for this one?
Well, I don't know, because this episode, you know, I didn't know what this was going into it.
And we should get to that in a second, because I'm sure a lot of people who will one day listen to this podcast also don't know what it is.
Yeah.
So I think the only way to start this is by saying that maybe we should turn this into a clip show of its own. Like, hey, Steven, remember that time we got kicked out of the White House on a previous episode of Brokeback Bebop?
Oh my god! Flashback.
I don't know. Okay, so this episode, we're here to talk about an episode of Cowboy Bebop, kind of. It's It's kind of a lost episode. And when we watched it, now that we've been through it, it's almost like, what are you going to talk about? I do feel like there are a couple of things to talk about surrounding this episode, Mishmash Blues, exists. Okay, this episode is called Mishmash Blues. It was directed by Shinichiro Watanabe, and it was written by Keiko Nobumoto and Shinichiro Watanabe. And it was storyboarded by no one, because I don't think there's any original animation in this episode. The episode was aired on television once. It originally aired on June 26, 1998 in Japan.
Hey, that was almost my birthday. What a
pretty
timely
close.
time to do this episode.
What a timely time. And basically, this episode is a clip show that was rushed into production as a potential series finale for Cowboy Bebop in reaction to it being briefly canceled due to some, I don't know exactly the details, but due to some violence in Japan, maybe school violence that happened in Japan.
Yeah, and they said school violence, but I don't know that Japan has had any, like, school shootings the way that the United States have.
Maybe it was
So it
something
might have
else.
literally just been, like, there were a lot of fights happening, and they're like, well, it must be this hyper-violent show that's on TV.
Which is
They always
interesting.
like to blame media for...
Yeah, they do.
Yeah.
And, well, I could see, especially in Japan at the time, being quite conservative, and this show being pretty out there for a cartoon of its time, why that could be considered dangerous. And, of course, we know the rest of the story. The rest of the episodes, of course, were aired. And this episode was just kind of lost to time, for better or for worse, probably for better. But it is an interesting look into a moment when this show was canceled and wasn't going to have its last 7 or 8 episodes or whatever, and was just going to end here with this clip show that's really barely even a clip show, because it's not like we're all together remembering and reflecting on the times. Remember this, let's cut back to it. It's more like the voice actors giving like loose character narration over clips we've seen before. And and
they don't even necessarily address the clips that are happening at all.
No, not really.
They're just kind of something to look at while we listen to them talk about themselves, you know?
Yeah. So we'll get into a little bit more. I did write down a couple trivia questions
I've got a couple trivia for you too. Why don't you lay one on me first?
Okay, my first one to lay on you is, what is the name of the alternative version of Spike with a different diet that he ponders upon?
Shoot. I remember the entire scene. I remember like thinking like, okay. I don't remember that.
He's Hamburger Spike.
Hamburger Spike.
I thought it was funny.
Yeah. What's always funny to me is in, Japanese is a language much older than English, but there are a lot of things that were created since the invention of English that only have
English
words.
Or English adjacent words creep in a lot.
Yeah, it's really
even for
funny.
stuff like teapot. I noticed in this episode. Yeah,
it's so funny. Here's my first one for you.
Okay.
It's a bit of a fuck you question, but to be fair, we've seen all this stuff before.
This is a bit of a fuck you episode.
Yeah. What floor is the casino restaurant on?
Oh my god. I should know this because
you should
seen it
know
before.
this. You've seen that scene of them in the elevator more than once.
10.
Ooh, you know what? You weren't far off. There were like 6 buttons that were shown, like strewn around in like one line. And the first floor that was shown was 10. That was blackjack, I think.
Steven,
You're looking for floor 15.
You think I can have my eyes glued to the subtitles and also read things that are going on?
I was singing for a second because
like
I was like, writing stuff on my phone and like doing stuff.
Then you were like, I can't comprehend this. Have I missed a big stretch?
Because like I'm so used to watching subtitled anime that I can like eat a meal and like play a video game while like still watching a subtitled anime and not miss anything because I'm so used to it.
I absolutely don't think you can play a video game and watch something to its full extent.
Well,
ever.
not like be engaged, but I could be like Minecrafting or something.
I guess.
Yeah. Could just do a Minecraft. What's your next question, Zachy Poo?
What is the greatest respect a writer can give their audience? And this is a bit of a fuck you question because I definitely wrote this down while you were not looking anywhere near the screen.
Nice. A good ending.
And do you think they did that with this episode?
Not with this episode, no. I think the actual show itself has an incredible ending.
The greatest respect a writer can give their audience is what they wouldn't expect.
Oh, cheeky.
I guess.
All right, my last one is, what does Spike compare to poison?
What does Spike compare to poison? Like junk food? Is that during the food part? I don't really remember this.
It's during one of the several food parts. There's like a specific thing that Spike is talking about and how it's poisonous.
Alcohol?
No.
I was closer with thinking food. What is it?
Yeah. Sugar candy. He talks about how,
okay. I kind of remember that part.
Giving kids candy when they're little makes them little shit fucks. So give your kids a tomato or something.
That's definitely what happened to us. No one gave us tomatoes.
No.
And look at us now. Explain the reasoning for the Bebop's name as provided in this episode.
Over a century ago, there was a sax player named Charlie Parker. Now, Charlie got tired of playing the same old thing over and over again. He's thought to be the first man to play without sheet music.
Is this in, like, the regular episodes, too?
Damn near.
That speech?
That is the same speech from, that's from an episode.
I don't remember it. Have we watched it?
Yeah, it was
I don't really remember
a much
it.
earlier episode.
Yeah.
And then what else did he say? And Charlie, and the type of music that Charlie was playing later became known as bebop. That's the name. That's the reason for the name of this ship.
Halfway through that, I couldn't tell anymore if I was listening to a Jet impression or if you were just like a bright, spry old man in a park that I came across that's telling me a story.
Hey there, boy.
Like, I can't give you $1. Sorry. So, yep, that's the trivia. Do you have any more? Did you get any more?
I don't have any more trivia.
That's it.
But that means that it's time for something that I thought about this the entire episode. I was like, what the actual fuck is Zach going to do?
Sure.
because we've arrived, we've landed, we're touching down in a new territory. Well, new for today, not new in the history of time. We're going to find out, did Zach comprehend the episode this week? And I don't know how well I comprehended the episode this week. So I'm curious, Zach, how are you feeling?
I've got a plan. I know exactly what I'm going to say, and you're not going to like it. Okay.
All right, are we going to like approach F territory?
I don't know. That's all up to you, my friend. Oh, I'm just a vessel.
Yeah. The words flow through you.
I'm just a vessel.
All right, well, you're going to have 20 seconds on the clock. May the force be with you.
Yeah, a lot of ground to cover.
Yeah. Are you ready?
Uh-huh.
Okay, 3, 2, 1, go.
The whole universe was in a hot, dense state when nearly 14 billion years ago expansion started. Wait, the Earth began to cool, the autotrophs began to drool, Neanderthals developed tools, we built a wall, we built the pyramids, math, science, history, unraveling the mystery. What the fuck was I supposed to do, Steven? Now, can we flip this? I want you to do it and tell me how.
No, I'm not going to tell you how to do it right.
Okay.
I think there's something that could have been done. If an attempt had been made, I would have thrown you some pity. But instead, you bring me that.
Sometimes, isn't it...
You bring B&L to this podcast?
Sometimes, isn't it better to just bring good podcasting to the table instead of... And I don't know. How am I supposed to sit? There were 22 parts.
Well, I think there were even more. I think they got to like 24.
There were like more specific,
which is confusing as shit. Because I was like, oh, they're gonna do a part for every episode of the show, but then they didn't get to 25 or 26, and I was like, what the fuck?
Well, it doesn't even work in the context of where they had gotten to in the show, because then there'd be like 19 or 18 or whatever.
Well, and why is this session XX, which means 20, but we're on episode 19?
I don't know. I think so. I'm going off the order that the Wikipedia page has it. They have this on the list of episodes, and this is where they have it. Maybe the episode we're watching next week's did air before this one. I don't know exactly how that works, but I thought the same thing as well.
Yeah, very confusing.
So I only have 20 seconds. How am I supposed to cover 27 parts? So I just covered the entire history of the world.
Did you? Because you got to math, science, history.
Unraveling the mystery. I got Unraveling the Mystery.
Yeah.
Which is truly all-encompassing.
You know, I'm impressed at how far you got into that theme song.
Yeah, it's unsettling how ready I am for that at any given second.
Yeah. I'll give you a...
I don't care.
4. You don't get a letter today. You get a number. You get a 4. I'm not telling you what it's out of. You just get a 4. Zach.
Oh, I know what it's out of.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm amazed. We're 13 minutes through this podcast. There are 2 things that I know I want to talk about. 3 things, actually.
There's a couple things I want to talk about, too. Why don't you go first, Zach?
Okay, well, first thing I want to talk about is... I always like to play the game. If this had been the ending of the show, this clip show that has a few interesting tidbits from each character, I like the Ed one quite a bit, but it just doesn't do anything. If this had been the end of the show, would it have discarded the good stuff the show had done because it never got to end?
Here's what I'll say.
Yes.
This is not an uncommon occurrence in the anime world, specifically in the 90s, early 2000s.
Okay.
Very famously, comedy gag anime manga called Bobobo that was about a blonde afroed man with a magical fighting mustache. That show ended in a very similar way, but instead of having an entire episode about it, about halfway, 3/4 through the last episode of the show, something pops up that says they're getting canceled, and they're like, what the fuck? We're getting canceled? And they freak out about it for 5 minutes, and that's just the end.
That's kind of funny.
Yeah, it's really funny. Now, this is not as good as that, but...
No. Because it's not a show like that.
It's not a show like that, exactly. I think that I would still like Cowboy Bebop if this were the case.
But it would be a hard, like, there's only 18 or 19 episodes. It was clearly telling a story, and it didn't get to tell that story.
Well, hey, that's like 5 more episodes than you get of a lot of anime, so...
Well, that's fair, but I just feel like and this is coming from someone who hasn't watched the entirety of the show, I feel like what's going to make this show a staple that's worth coming back to is like the cinematic quality of the story that it tells from beginning to the end, and being able to revisit it as a piece, almost like something like a different medium, but like over the garden wall. Like you go back to revisit the whole piece. You don't just like watch an episode of Cowboy Bebop. I feel like it would be, I mean, like you can, there are episodes you can watch that way. But I don't know. I feel like it would be pretty weird for me.
Yeah. Well, I think feel like we wouldn't be doing this podcast about from the show's overall legacy score and like exactly, you know, I mean, because this came before Samurai Champloo, and a lot of people find one or the other first. In this episode, you can definitely tell they were already working on Samurai Champloo. I'll talk about why later. But
interesting.
The finale of Cowboy Bebop, I think, is pretty universally, like, if you Google like top anime finales, it's going to be on that any list you find. And I think that the cinematic quality of those last 2 episodes... I'm
about to fact check you on that. Keep talking.
So good. Yeah, go Google it. Google top 10.
I am. Keep talking.
Yeah. I try to avoid spoilers, though.
Sure. I already know one big spoiler, but that's okay.
Okay, then you're fine. Yeah, I think that this is like a good attempt. It's better than just not putting anything out, I think. And I truly do believe that. I would rather have an episode that at least like says, hey, here's a little bit of closure. This sucks. We're not gone forever. You will see the real Cowboy Bebop ending at some point. Like, I think that ending of this episode makes it more okay for me. But I don't think that there's anything of real substance in this episode other than the characters taking, like, semi-deep looks at themselves, I guess. I agree with you, though. I like the Ed runner probably the best because Ed's like, nothing really bad's happened to me. I just kind of be doing what I do, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that's
I don't
exactly
think anything
who
bad's
Ed
ever happened to me.
Right? Meanwhile, Jet's
if
like,
it has, I don't
if
remember.
one chops the bonsai tree in the wrong way, then they're never gonna chop again.
and Faye's like, maybe I hate that I'm this way, but I can't help it.
I hate that they make Faye's whole character, like, there's a whole stretch where she's just like, I like men that do this. I don't like men that do this. I like men. I didn't really like that very much.
Yeah.
One thing that I want to talk about here in a second is that the only way to watch this episode is in Japanese, so we watched it as opposed to the rest of the series. We've been watching the dub for my benefit. We watched the original voice actors in this episode, something to talk about. It made me a little bit disappointed what they did with Faye in this episode, even when they don't do much with every character, because I didn't get a lot of range from the voice actors.
No, and I don't think that Faye is a character that... They didn't really give her anything of emotional weight to do.
I think the voice actress in English, and this is just based off of the snips of dialogue I get from this episode, not directly comparing what I've seen both ways, right?
Yeah.
I feel like the voice actress in English gives Faye... Her voice just has that quality of, like, spunk and...
Yeah, I agree.
A beautiful woman that has this, like, kind of tomboyishness in her. I think a lot of that does come from the tone of voice. I fact-checked you on the thing. I looked at 2 lists. They both had Cowboy Bebop on there. One was based off of the IMDb ratings of the top 10 of all time, and it had Cowboy Bebop at number 3, with number 2 being Dragon Ball Super.
That's... Wow. Okay.
And number 1 being Code Geass.
Lelouch of the Rebellion.
Yes.
Yeah.
And also Samurai Champloo is on the list
Samurai
as well.
Champloo has a very
6.
strong ending.
Yep. Okay, so other things I wanted to mention, and I know there's stuff you want to mention too. Well, let's talk a little bit more about the voice actors, comparing the English to the Japanese. What do you think based off of just watching this?
I have watched the show in English and Japanese probably... about the same amount of times, maybe English a little more just because we're watching it for this, but I think I like different things. One thing that's cool about anime is that you can totally change how a character is perceived by the voice acting performance.
Absolutely.
And I think that this show, like you said, Faye is a lot more spunky in the English one. She's a little bit more... They
kind of
like,
all are a little bit.
Yeah. I think that Spike... I like Spike a lot in English and Japanese. I mean, Steve Bloom is obviously great in English, but I think the Japanese voice actor is a little bit more dead inside, which is kind of what I get from Spike. It's so
dead serious, which is how Spike is, but I think the voice that he has in English helps the moments where we see a little bit of levity stand out a lot. But however, maybe the Japanese does too, because
it does. This episode doesn't really give them a lot of chance, because I'm sure exactly what happened is they said, hey guys, you got to come in records it. Because normally anime is not finished when the season starts a lot of the time.
Sure.
It's kind of a lot of shows are to the point almost where South Park is, where they're banging it out every week. Just because studios, and this is not the case with Cowboy Bebop, but a lot of shows that come out like every week and don't stop coming out, like South Park does for a lot of the time, right? That studio's under so much like work, they're doing so many shows that they have to like be at max 2 or 3 weeks ahead of the episode coming out, which is why the English dub comes out so much later for some shows. So for Cowboy Bebop, they were a little bit different schedule. I mean, they had like a lot of it done, but not all of it. But when they're like, okay, we can't air this, I'm sure they called them in and said, hey, read these lines over this stuff. We're getting canceled. Hopefully it's not
sure
permanent.
At this point, the show was probably near finished.
Yeah.
It was just that the episodes weren't going to be aired from this point forward.
Yeah.
Because we're talking like
that they
7-8 episodes left of a highly produced show. I've seen the types of shows that look more like they're done in a week, which like South Park, it's almost more incredible, and you're way more willing to be forgiving of shortcuts in animation because of all the pressure they're under. But I'm sure a show like this that has so much detail into it, it had to be practically done. I'm surprised. I guess it shows how times have changed, but that a network would be like, we've got, instead of just being like, let's just burn off these 7 episodes and then never talk about it ever again. I'm surprised that they would do this. And I also wonder the history on when it came back.
Well, and this is the same time period, though, where Japan banned Pokemon for a while because an episode had too much... Yeah. And so they were like, well, let's shut the whole shit down. And that set a precedent in anime to this day where even like the most high-octane like action sequences are dimmed when you watch them so that there's no risk. They, at that time,
which I think is dumb
quick.
Because I've done research on that Pokemon thing before just because it's a big deal in television history. I don't think there's as much weight to the show being at fault than what you would think. It was like in a few... It was
It wasn't like people, 1,000 kids fucking died. Like, no. Like 3 people had a seizure and they were like,
and they
absolutely
were probably
not.
already predisposed to it.
Yeah. But on the voice acting, I think that the Japanese one does have a lot more instances than this episode, but I think that the actors did a good job under the circumstances, but what they were working with was a lot more introspective and just flat talking, other than Ed, of course. So they didn't really get as much
Jet.
of a chance.
I think Jet gets a little
bit
of layer in this episode.
But Spike doesn't talk about anything in his life or anything like that. He's just kind of the overall narrator for the episode, so he doesn't also have that much emotional stuff to go into.
Something that I found interesting about this episode, particularly like the last few minutes of it, and you might have to watch it again to see some of the stuff because I've watched it twice now. I feel like there's a lot of commentary from the creators about why the show is being pulled.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff in the last couple minutes about the truth being kept from you and stuff like that, which can be taken a bunch of different ways. But I feel like there's some stuff in there. And then at the end, it literally says you'll see the real Cowboy Bebop one day.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of interesting. A show that's already pretty non-traditional is like, they're going to pull us. We have a second to slap something together. Let's kind of give a middle finger to the people for pulling our show when it doesn't have anything to do with any of the stuff that's going on.
Well, and this is a show that already was pretty edgy with all the drug use, the actually using guns, because it's one thing to have a magical beam that fires from your hand, but when you're pointing a gun at someone and shooting them, that's a whole different thing that in a cartoon was not super prominent. I mean, you had shows like Trigun, but even that, it's a very unrealistic weapon. This was one of the first like very popular anime that had that. I mean, now there are plenty of anime that came out before where guns were a thing, but there's a lot of like firearm combat with consequences in this. This isn't G.I. Joe where they're shooting a bunch but everyone's missing. In this show, people get shot. The main character
and they die.
Gets shot. Yeah, like people get hurt, like people get knocked out, like stuff happens. But they made sure that when they were doing this, I think they stayed true to their views and made the show they wanted to make, and they got pulled for it. But I think that it's a better show because they didn't curb that at all.
So what is there left to say about the Mishmash Blues? What do we want to cover in these last
I want to talk
minutes?
about the music.
Yeah, especially that song at the end.
Yeah, so that song at the end is called Recover the Sky of Day by Shaka Zombie.
They practically play the whole thing over the credits with some pretty animation. It's a really good song.
Yeah, I like it. So what tells me that they were working on Samurai Champloo at this exact same time, or at least we're about to start, is in the credits they listed a name. That's why I was like Googling this thing so hard, because I was trying to figure out who it was. But there's a name, Suchi, who popped up. It was written in like regular romantic letters, as opposed to in like I'll just call it kanji, even though it's not kanji. And he does a lot of the music for Samurai Champloo.
Oh, cool.
And so Samurai Champloo, whereas Cowboy Bebop is jazz, Samurai Champloo is lo-fi hip-hop. Cool. So all the background music
and there are a lot of like from section to section, almost kind of like lo-fi, like trap, not quite trap beats, but like sort of beats that are playing over each segment.
And so a big time producer and influence of Samurai Champloo's music, and who does like the opening song, is Nujabes, who's a very, 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 very well known like lo-fi producer in that realm, in that sphere. Like he's probably held on the equivalence of like Jay Dilla in terms of that like boom bap, like straight up like garage underground like hip hop scene. And Jay Dilla can be felt in a lot of like current music that's coming out, but Nujabes was like on that level at that time.
I love words that describe sounds. You saying boom bap made me so happy. I love like I know that's so
that's what it is.
I love
you know?
Is that onomatopoeia?
Onomatopoeia.
I love stuff like that because it's exactly how you describe it.
Yeah,
that has nothing to do with what you were saying. That's cool information. It just made me happy instantly when you said that.
Yeah, well, I'm glad, and I like that. I think that it creates such a different vibe than normally. Like this doesn't feel like a Cowboy Bebop episode.
Yeah, I noticed that because I was thinking, there's a lot of music in this episode. I didn't know as much what quite made it sound different, but it makes sense.
And whereas they meticulously recorded all the songs for all the other episodes with this whole like multi-piece band, all these original compositions, for this one, if you're working on another show, you're like, who's nearby? Oh, these guys that are helping me with this show, can you just throw some background beats and like a cool song in this? And they're like, sure. And so that's how you get the music for this episode, which I think is really, really cool.
Well, let's do, is there a Captain of the Bebop for this episode?
You know what? I have one.
I don't. So I'm going to let you go first while I kind of ponder it.
If I have to give it to somebody, I'm going to give it to Ed. I think that in the
Ed's
circumstances,
just like your favorite
Ed
character,
still
I feel like a little bit.
I like Ed.
You wouldn't say Ed is your favorite character, but I feel like all the time you're like, I love Ed.
I do love Ed. Ed is not my favorite character, but I do love Ed. I think that Ed comes through the most like themselves in this episode.
Sure.
Jet's probably close, but I think that Ed's like runner seemed like it would be in Cowboy Bebop regardless of whether it was ending in this episode or not.
Sure, yeah. There were some bits that felt like Ed-isms, whereas the rest of the show was kind of boring.
Well, and I really, there's a part where Ed is saying like, I don't get into like bad situations because I only do things that look like fun. And if they're not fun,
if they're boring, I find out how to make them fun. And if they're still boring, then I go to sleep.
Yeah,
and then dreams are fun. Yeah,
I love that. I also like the runner about dreams in this episode. I think that was a kind of cool little part where it's like, if you say you don't dream, you're just not remembering. Like, we're dreaming when we're awake, we're dreaming when we're asleep. Like, those are the same things. Like, our goals, our ambitions, our dreams, they're all important. They all matter. We just need to like accept them and like go for it, which I think is a kind of cool message that for some reason is in this episode.
Yeah, thinking about it while you're talking about it, I think I'm going to go ahead and for this week, I'm going to give my captain to Raj. I think Raj has a really good episode this week. Usually they lean a little too heavy on him being too afraid to talk to women, but I thought in this one, they really did something nice with his character.
Yeah,
so
my MVP this week, Amy Farrah Fowler.
Well, I'm amazed. You know what, Zach? That was fun.
Kudos to us. Pat on the back.
We can podcast about anything if we can podcast about this. Mishmash Blues, if you've never heard of it before this, you can see it on YouTube subtitled. Yeah. It was fun watching it because there's some like really grade school translations where I don't know, stuff like the word rule being translated to like thing not to do or thing like that, which is because this episode never aired in the US.
So it's just some dude with like Google Translate.
Which is cool. I love stuff like that.
And it really made me feel like, and this is something that maybe some people watching the show can relate to, there was a time where anime was a lot less accessible in the US.
So the fact that we can just find this and watch it.
Well, I remember
of it being lost to
trying
time.
to watch Naruto, and I would have to watch an episode in 3 different videos that were split up in YouTube.
I remember
and if
that.
You were lucky,
I did that a little bit
they were
too.
on the same channel, but a lot of times those videos would get taken down, so someone would have.
So
like
you'd
4
have to find
different...
someone else's upload, find the part in the episode you were
exactly.
at. Watch
and,
the 2
I watched,
minutes
like,
of that part.
Hundreds of episodes of anime like that.
Yeah.
As a teenager, just like wanting to watch it when it wasn't Saturday.
Yeah.
You know, so this was like that same kind of vibe of like the shitty fan subs and like it's
Lost
great.
media is so interesting because there are pieces of television, film, music that are literally lost to time now that we're seeing the end of home media.
Yeah.
And we're seeing how streaming availability can change on a fly, and not always is there another streamer to pick up what's being dropped by something, you know? And especially in a format like anime where there's hundreds and hundreds of shows with thousands of episodes, I'm sure it's easy for some of that, especially the older stuff, to be lost to time.
Yeah.
So it's pretty cool that this episode that doesn't mean jack shit to Cowboy Bebop that we were able to find it, we're able to watch it. It's a cool little piece of history. I even loved from this specific YouTube video being able to see like the little VCR player mechanics and like blips of commercial, like Japanese commercials. That was awesome. Well, let's wrap this up. This was fun.
This was fun. This was good. Thank you for suggesting we do this episode, Zach.
Yeah,
I never knew it existed, and now I'm kind of glad that I do because it's like I said, it's a cool piece of history that, you know, a lot of Cowboy Bebop fans never will get to see, but it's a cool thing that makes it a little more like attaches it to a time in the real world, and I think that's awesome.
Well, next week we'll be back with the first of the final 8 episodes of Cowboy Bebop's original animated run. That's Wild Horses. So we'll be here to talk about this one next week. Thanks for tuning in, everybody, and see you later, Space Cowgirl.
Heyo, see ya, Spacer, alligator.
Mine was better.
Bang bang.
空奪われ明日が割れ心蝕む闇が生まれ夢は枯れ不安になれ空の行方を知るのは誰教えておくれ行き場失う鳥と雲と星と俺
Thanks for listening. Support this show and our podcast network at patreon.com/can'tdisappointpodcast, where starting at $5 a month, you can get immediate access to all 40 outrageous sessions of Brokeback Bebop. See you next time, Space Cowboy.